The end of the world has arrived, and my mother-in-law sold the supplies I had hoarded. I tried desperately to stop her, but I was brutally beaten by my husband. When my son got sick, I was infected while taking care of him alone. However, my son refused to give me medicine. I had a high fever that made me mentally impaired, and they exchanged my body for food, just as the end of the world was about to end. In order to cover up their crimes, they turned me into food. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself 10 days before the outbreak of the apocalypse. 1. The pain of the knife slashing across my neck hadn't faded away yet. My husband, Elias, my son, Easton, and my mother-in-law pounced on me and started tearing at me ravenously. I watched helplessly as they treated me like food. My eyes gradually dimmed, and I lost consciousness completely. When I was in a daze, I heard Elias's voice in my ear. Genevieve, wash the dishes as soon as you're done eating. Didn't he kill me? How could I still hear his vicious voice? I opened my eyes and saw Elias's impatient face. What was going on here? The time on the clock showed that it was 10 days before the end of the world happened. On this day, because of a cold, after cooking dinner, I fell asleep on the sofa. When Elias woke me up to wash the dishes, the spare ribs and large shrimps I had cooked had already been eaten by them. There were only a few remaining green leafy vegetables that had been picked over and the vegetable soup at the bottom of the plate left. None of my family members cared whether I was sick or whether there was enough food left for me to eat. It turned out that I had been reborn, too. Before being reborn, I worked at the city infectious diseases hospital. At first, several delirious patients were brought in. After they died, they came back to life and turned into monsters without the ability to feel pain. As the situation developed, more and more patients were brought in. The patients were like the zombies in the movies. I was worried that it would turn into another situation similar to the mask incident. I quickly bought a large number of canned goods and instant foods from an online supermarket and asked my husband, Elias, to pick up our son and bring him home. I myself rushed home in a hurry with a large quantity of commonly used medications. As soon as I entered the house, my mother-in-law said with dissatisfaction on her face, "What did you buy all these things for? You're wasting my son's money. Return them all immediately." I immediately explained, hoping that the whole family could work together to get through the end of the world. My mother-in-law had a mocking expression on her face, looking as if she had seen through me. The end of the world. I think you're just lazy and don't want to cook. I didn't have time to explain more, so I could only perfunctorily say, "Mom, I'm going to buy some more things first. I'll talk to you when I get back." My husband stopped me from leaving and said, "Mom wants to sell these things for the sake of the family. You should understand her. Honey, you have to trust me. Organize the supplies, and we'll talk about it when I get back." When I came back home after buying the riot gear, I found that the hoarded supplies were gone. My mother-in-law was sitting on the sofa, crossing her legs, giving me a triumphant glance and counting the money happily. I couldn't hold back the despair and anger in my heart and shouted, "Why did you sell my things?" Elias said unhappily, "That's my mom." My eyes were red, and I stared at him, asking with a sob, "That's our life-saving stuff. Why didn't you listen to me? Why?" Elias looked embarrassed and didn't know how to explain. My mother-in-law said leisurely, "A man being bossed around by his wife, what kind of future does he have? If our relatives knew about it, they'd all laugh at you." Elias was provoked by my mother-in-law. He kicked me to the ground, punched and kicked me, and knocked me unconscious. 3. My mother-in-law and my husband left me lying on the ground. When I woke up, my mother-in-law spat at me and said, "Bah, you junk stuff. You caused the family to lose 10,000 yuan." I was in so much pain all over my body from the beating that I couldn't move, not even having the strength to get up. My phone rang, and I struggled to take it out and answer it. My son Easton's crying voice came from the phone, "Mom, come and save me quickly. There are biting monsters everywhere in the school." I suddenly looked at Elias and said, "You didn't go to pick up the child." Elias didn't dare to look me in the eye. He turned his head guiltily and then angrily cursed. "You knew there was danger. Why didn't you go to pick him up?" "Son, don't be afraid. Mom is coming to pick you up right away." I wiped the blood from my forehead and put on the riot gear. My child is my life. I would crawl there to save him even if I had to. "If you take the protective gear away, what are we going to do when we go out?" Elias grabbed my arm and forbade me from taking the newly bought riot gear. My mother-in-law urged, "Hurry up and save Easton." If you don't bring my grandson back safely, you can just die outside. I angrily threw the riot gear on the ground and rushed out of the house. In my previous life, I was lucky enough to bring my son home safely, but I ended up saving an ungrateful person, for Elias was sitting on the other side of the sofa. Seeing that I didn't respond, he kicked me and ordered, "Hurry up and finish eating, then wash the dishes." My mother-in-law was picking her teeth, with oil all over her mouth. Watching TV leisurely, my son was playing games on his phone. I got up and picked up my bag, saying, "I'm not feeling well, I'm going to the hospital," Elias said unhappily. "Wash the dishes first before you go." My mother-in-law also mumbled, "Going to the hospital for a minor illness, so delicate." I slammed the door angrily and left, afraid that if I walked any slower, I wouldn't be able to resist slapping them in the face. When I was young, I was attracted to good-looking men and was fascinated by the handsome Elias. When I discovered his true nature, I kept putting up with it because of the child, and it had dragged on until now. If it weren't for the wrong timing, I would have gotten rid of these heartless people in this family immediately. 5. I had a delicious dinner and then lay on the soft bed of a 5-star hotel. I was looking for a satisfactory house online. Soon, I took a fancy to a property. There were only 8 buildings in the community. Each building had 2 elevators for 2 households. It was located in the suburban area, and the occupancy rate was low. I contacted the real estate agent overnight, booked the penthouse, and looked for a house renovation company. With my profession as a doctor, I borrowed 1 million yuan from various online lending platforms. I also contacted the bank to mortgage the house, together with hundreds of thousands of yuan in savings. The funds in my hand reached 3 million yuan. With a large sum of money invested, the house renovation company quickly reinforced the house I rented. An anti-breach steel door was added inside the entrance door, and one-way film was pasted on all the glass. Steel mesh was installed in the windows to ensure that it looked the same on the outside, but the protection inside was comparable to that of a bank. Solar panels were installed on the roof, and energy storage batteries were placed inside the house during the construction period. I bought a large number of supplies: compressed biscuits, self-heating dry rations, small hot pots, meat canned goods, and fruit canned goods, self-defense weapons such as gasoline, alcohol, a continuous shooting bow, knives, and stun guns, equipment such as generators, maritime satellite video transmission systems, solar panels, and surveillance cameras, medicines, vitamins, and dog food were also indispensable. 6. The next evening, I returned home. Elias didn't care about my health and ordered, "You slammed the door yesterday and made Mom angry. Apologize and then go cook." My mother-in-law was cracking sunflower seeds, looking triumphant, as if saying that her son was still on her side. I walked up to my mother-in-law, suppressing the feeling of nausea, and smiled. "Mom, I signed up for a tour group. The whole family can go and relax." My son cheered, and Elias also showed an expression that said, "You're sensible." My mother-in-law squinted at me with her triangular eyes and sneered, "You're smart enough." Under the pretext of calming my mother-in-law down, I took them out to eat. Do they think I'll cook for them again? They don't deserve it. I've given selflessly all these years, but all I got was them pushing their luck. They took my efforts for granted. The money I earned was considered family income. The money Elias earned was regarded as hard-earned money. Who doesn't work hard to make money nowadays? I finally realized clearly that a lot of evil comes from genes. No one can change those evil people. The only way is to stay away from them. 7. On the day of the trip, I made an excuse that there was an urgent matter at the hospital and didn't join the tour group. Their family went on the trip happily. I asked the construction team to enter immediately and installed hidden surveillance cameras all over the house. Small-scale solar panels and storage batteries were installed on the roof to supply power to the surveillance cameras and the maritime satellite video system, to ensure that even after the power went out in the apocalypse, I could still see what was going on at home. After everything was done, I informed Elias that I was going on a business trip to another place and left with my beloved dog, Jojo. I threw the keys away. I would never come back to this home again. 8. 3 days after they returned from the trip, they didn't call me even once. The situation on the streets was getting more and more chaotic, and cases of people getting injured occurred from time to time. The police shot and killed the rabid zombies on the spot, and for a while, the situation was brought under control. But I knew that things were far from that simple. Finally, when the time came to the moment when the end of the world happened again, more than half of humanity, regardless of their jobs, lost consciousness at the same time. People around suddenly fainted, causing panic among everyone. The airplanes in the sky crashed towards the ground. The cars lost control, either running over the fainted people or crashing into a ball of fire. People were crying and wailing. The conscious people went to help the fainted ones. When people saw the zombies with their bodies twisted out of shape crawling out of the crashed cars. When the zombies that had been flattened like pancakes suddenly bit the people next to them, people finally realized something was wrong and screamed and fled in all directions. The zombies were sensitive to sound and chased after the panicked people, knocking them down one by one and biting off pieces of their flesh and blood. I stood on the rooftop, calmly watching all this. It seemed that humanity was being punished, and the virus broke out collectively at this moment. The end of the world had begun. 9. The red soup was boiling in the pot. I picked up a slice of meat, blanched it for 7 seconds, and immediately picked it up and ate it. The slices of meat were tender and delicious, with a strong aroma of chili. Jojo was lying on the ground, struggling with a big bone. When I was enjoying my meal happily, Elias made a video call. "Wife, where are you? Is the hospital safe? I miss you, and so does our son. Come back quickly." It was the end of the world. And there were crashed cars and man-eating zombies everywhere on the street. Asking me to go back at this time really meant they didn't care about my life at all. I picked up the wine glass, took a sip of red wine, turned the camera around, and filmed the food on the table. There were hairy crabs, Australian lobsters, abalones, countless precious ingredients. I lazily replied, "I'm too full to move." My mother-in-law pushed Elias aside and said in a sharp voice, "Bring all these back immediately and let us eat them, Genevieve. My mom is old and gets emotional easily. Our son is also hungry. Come back and cook for us quickly." Every time my mother-in-law lost her temper, Elias would say soft words. One played the bad cop, and the other played the good cop, manipulating me for more than a decade. I earned so much money for the family, but I never got a single kind word from them. Now, spending the money on myself, eating and drinking well. It feels great. Sure enough, when money is spent in the right place, it brings happiness. Spending it on heartless people can only bring endless pain. I smiled and said, "You have your mom, let your mom cook for you." Elias asked in disbelief, "You don't care about me, but don't you care about our son either, trying to use our son to coerce me?" I retorted, "Why doesn't the son's father cook? Is he dead?" Elias was so angry that he couldn't say a word. My son was drooling over the food and shouted, "All these are mine. If you don't give them to me to eat, when you die in the future, I'll feed you to the wild dogs." This was the son I had painstakingly raised, accompanying him to all kinds of interest classes and tutoring classes. It would have been better to spend the money on myself, getting beauty treatments and having afternoon tea with my sisters. I was too lazy to look at the ugly faces of this family. I hung up the phone and continued to enjoy myself. Before long, the power would go out, and these things couldn't be preserved. There was a knock on the door. I didn't dare to respond. I hugged Jojo tightly and forbade it from making a sound. In the end of the world, people's hearts were unpredictable. In order to survive, they could do anything. Seeing that I didn't respond for a long time, a fierce man's voice came from outside the door. "Open the door. I know there's someone inside. Don't force me to break the door down." Afraid that the door would be damaged, I opened a small crack. The man was big and burly, with a skull tattoo on his arm. He didn't look like a good person at all. Before I could ask, he pushed the door open forcefully and swaggered in. His eyes swept over the food on the table and then over the mountains of supplies. His eyes were filled with greed. He sat on the sofa, sized up my body, and had a sinister smile on his face. "You're a bit old. But considering you've prepared so many things for me, Donovan will protect you from now on." He patted his thigh. "Come over here and pour me a glass of wine." It was obvious that he intended to take over my supplies and keep me for his amusement. The name Donovan was very well known in the later stage of the apocalypse. He gathered a group of reckless hooligans in the suburban area and robbed supplies everywhere. He killed the men and took the women back for his pleasure. After getting tired of them, he would take the women out as bait. Unexpectedly, at the very beginning of the apocalypse, I had encountered this scumbag. I obediently walked over. Donovan picked up the chopsticks and put an abalone into the pot, looking triumphant. Unfortunately, he was being triumphant too early. I took out the stun gun and jabbed it at him. Donovan was electrocuted and trembled all over, sliding off the sofa. I electrocuted him for a full minute until his skin gave off a burnt smell before I stopped. Donovan's body twitched from time to time, and disgusting saliva flowed out of the corner of his mouth. I tied him up tightly and threw him aside. 10. When Donovan woke up and saw Jojo baring its teeth, he was so scared that he leaned back and hit his head against the wall. The pain ignited his ferocity, and he stared at me with dangerous eyes. I squatted in front of him and tapped his cheek with a knife. Donovan didn't think that a woman in a harmonious society would kill someone and asked disdainfully, "Do you dare to kill? If not, let me go." I sneered, put on my protective gear, and dragged him towards the balcony. Roaring sounds and the clanking of chains came from the balcony. A zombie was waving its claws and teeth through the balcony door. Donovan was terrified and couldn't believe his eyes. "I caught this one specially from downstairs. You can get along with him well." Donovan finally realized that he had provoked not a weak woman but a living devil. He kept begging me to let him go, promising that he would never trouble me again afterwards. At the beginning of the apocalypse, people hadn't yet despaired because of the end of the world and still had a basic respect for the law. However, I had seen how humans resorted to any means to survive in the apocalypse. There was no need for a saint in the end of the world. I opened the door and pushed Donovan in. 11. When Elias contacted me, I was eating beef jerky and watching a drama while hugging Jojo. I answered the video call. Elias, my son, and my mother-in-law crowded in front of the camera, looking gaunt. I casually fed a piece of beef jerky to Jojo. My mother-in-law's triangular eyes widened, and she scolded me with a look of great distress and indignation. "Are you even human? Your husband and son are still hungry, yet you're feeding the dog. Bring the food back immediately," my son said pitifully. "Mom, I want to eat too. I'm so hungry," Elias also persuaded. "Our son is almost starving to death. Wife, we need you." I sighed and showed a helpless expression. "If your grandma hadn't stopped me from buying dry food every time, you wouldn't be hungry now." In the past, whenever I bought instant noodles or self-heating food, my mother-in-law would scold me for feeding the family junk food and said I was trying to harm our son, and that I had to cook instead. It was as if the food cooked by my hands that used to hold a scalpel to save lives would be more nutritious. If I bought too many groceries, she would scold me for being wasteful. If I bought too much rice, she would say it took up too much space and that we should buy it only when we needed it. Well, now it's fine. I guess my son has eaten up all his snacks. My son glared at my mother-in-law fiercely and cursed. "It's all your fault, you old hag. You didn't let Mom buy anything. You always make Mom do the work and scold her. Now she won't come back." Look, my son, who's in junior high school, actually knows everything. It's just that before, it had nothing to do with him, so he didn't care that I was being tortured. My mother-in-law doted on her grandson. Usually, it was always, "Grandma is good," and "Grandson is good." This was the first time she was cursed by her grandson. Without thinking, she directly slapped Easton in the face. Easton wasn't going to be outdone. He kicked his grandmother down and said, "Mom, you can go home without worry. Don't be afraid of her. I'll protect you." I smiled. It had only been a week since the end of the world started, and the power hadn't gone out yet, but their ugly true colors had already been revealed. I picked up Jojo, stroked its soft fur, and fed it beef jerky, saying, "There's too much stuff to carry. You can come to me if you want." Elias and my son fell silent. The brave ones had already gone out onto the streets to kill zombies and find food. However, they didn't dare to. In my previous life, they had the courage to kill me, but they didn't have the courage to face the zombies outside. Elias hesitated for a long time and then said timidly, "It's too dangerous outside. I'm afraid something will happen to our son. Bring the food back, and we can wait for rescue together." Rescue? There won't be any. The power is going to go out soon too. They're afraid of dying, but they're not afraid that something will happen to me on my way back. I gave them a final reminder. Adjust the walkie-talkie at home to frequency 8 to contact me. Before leaving home, I prepared walkie-talkies and solar panels. They were my closest and most beloved family members. Even if the power went out, we couldn't lose contact. 12. half a month after the end of the world occurred. The power in the city had already gone out, relying on solar energy. I still watched dramas and played with the dog every day, without work or housework, and with sufficient food and water. I was extremely happy. In my spare time, I watched Elias's situation through the surveillance cameras to pass the time. Elias couldn't stand the hunger and bought food at a high price. A steamed bun cost 500 yuan, and a bowl of rice cost 1,000 yuan. As time went by, the price of food became more and more expensive. Elias used all my gold and silver jewelry to exchange for a pack of instant noodles. My son was so hungry that his eyes turned blue, and he stretched out his hand, saying, "Give it to me quickly." Elias refused. "I'm the breadwinner. I need to have the strength to find food for you guys." Elias wolfed down the instant noodles without even having time to put in the seasoning packet. "Give it to me, I'm hungry." My son was used to being bossy and tried to grab it. He didn't care about the future. He couldn't stand the idea of others being full while he was hungry. Elias didn't let go. While they were struggling over it, the crumbs of the instant noodles spilled out of the bag. My mother-in-law crawled on the ground and quickly picked up the crumbs and stuffed them into her mouth. My son wasn't as strong as Elias. Out of anger, he opened his mouth and bit him. Elias's arm was bitten until it bled, and he let go in pain. My son snatched the instant noodles. Just as he took a bite, he was knocked down by Elias's punch. In my previous life, they exchanged me for food and never complained that my mother-in-law had sold the supplies I had hoarded. Now, over a pack of instant noodles, the so-called father-son harmony completely fell apart. My son contacted me while crying, "Mom, he took my food and hit me. Come and pick me up quickly." When I took care of his studies, it was as if I had done something extremely offensive. He was annoyed with me and hated me. Elias treated him like a pet. When he was in a good mood, he would play with him and let him eat snacks without limit, and then he would like his father. Now that he's been beaten, he knows to look for his mom. "Son, listen." I poured a glass of cola. The sound of the cola fizzing was transmitted through the walkie-talkie. "Jojo is drinking milk and eating beef. I have everything here." My voice was full of temptation. "You're not allowed to drink the cola, and you're not allowed to feed Jojo. It's all mine, everything is mine." My son roared jealously. My greedy and stupid son, not even knowing my address yet, was already being possessive of the food. 13. Jojo rested its head on my leg, wagging its tail happily. Once evil starts, it's very difficult to stop. Elias slapped his son to the ground and cursed, "You idiot. You don't even know your mom's address yet, and you've already made her ignore you. What's the use of raising such a useless person like you? You're not even as good as Jojo. Jojo can even be killed and eaten for meat. Keep trying to contact her. If your mom ignores you, I'll beat you to death." My son lay on the ground, looking at him with hatred in his eyes. My mother-in-law looked at my son with a flickering gaze, her eyes full of an unclear meaning. I turned off the walkie-talkie and stopped contacting them. It's not enough. The pressure the end of the world has brought them is not enough. 14. 3 months later, it became increasingly difficult to find supplies. For a bite of food, killing had become the norm, and the evil of human nature was fully revealed. The brave ones went to places like supermarkets, granaries, and restaurants that had a large amount of food. Those who didn't dare to face the zombies pried open doors from house to house in search of food. Fortunately, there were few people in my community, and I only encountered people trying to pry open the door twice. Each time, I would lead Donovan and another zombie into the living room. The roars of the zombies would scare away the intruders. Donovan had kept his promise and protected me. Elias and his family had barely managed to survive until now by prying open doors. My mother-in-law, who was 155 meters tall and weighed 80 kilograms before, had now become as thin as a skeleton. Elias and my son were also extremely emaciated, with sunken cheeks, as frail as Lin Dayu. If I didn't insist on exercising and practicing yoga every day, I would have gained 10 kilograms. One night, my mother-in-law secretly pulled Elias into the kitchen. "Son, we haven't found anything to eat for 3 days. I'm so hungry," Elias said impatiently. "What can I do?" "That damn Genevieve isn't saying anything either. I don't know if she's dead outside." My mother-in-law glanced in the direction of the bedroom, and words as devilish as they could be came out of her mouth. "Kill Easton, and the two of us can survive." He offended his wife. "That's why she's ignoring us. If he's dead, his wife will calm down, we'll go find her and live comfortably from then on. Hesitation appeared in Elias's eyes. After all, that was his own son. My mother-in-law continued to coax him, don't you want to eat meat? My son couldn't fall asleep because of hunger. Hearing the sound of them going into the kitchen, he thought they were stealing food and followed them. After hearing this, he couldn't hold back anymore. He kicked open the kitchen door and rushed in like a mad bull, knocking his grandmother to the ground. He picked up a kitchen knife and stabbed his grandmother's body again and again. Elias looked at his son's ferocious face and took 2 steps back in fear. My son held the knife and looked at Elias with blood-red eyes. Eat. 15. Elias called me every day. Wife, my mom is dead. No one will bully you anymore. Where are you? I miss you. Look, he always knew that I was being bullied and endured humiliation for the sake of our son. It's just that the pain didn't fall on him, so he didn't know what it was like. Now this hypocritical display of affection was just an act for the sake of survival. Who can't act? I picked up the walkie-talkie. Husband, I have a lot of food here. Come to me quickly. Elias fell silent. Coming to find me was risky, and he could die at any moment. But if he didn't come, he would starve to death. He was caught in a dilemma. I suggested, find more neighbors to come with you. I have a lot of supplies stored up. Elias's eyes lit up, as long as he didn't reveal the location. The neighbors would have to protect them for the sake of food. Wife, you're amazing. After his excitement subsided, he reminded me, people's hearts are unpredictable. Hide the food and just leave a little for the neighbors to eat. I agreed and told him the address. I'm at room 401, Unit 1, Building 3, Lishui Homeland, 16. Elias contacted the neighbors and painted a picture of a paradise for them. There was plenty of food, few zombies, and a beautiful environment. I used to think that only capitalists knew how to make empty promises, but it turned out he could do it too. These people who were on the verge of starving to death fawned over Elias in order to go to this dream place, fearing that they would be left behind. Elias was full of himself and made those who wanted to go pay with food as an entrance fee. If they really couldn't produce any food, they could use women instead. After bossing people around for 2 days, he gathered more than 50 people and set off in over 10 cars. I didn't care how many of these people could make it to Lishui Homeland alive. 17. In my previous life, when I saved my son, he was shaking all over and covered in cold sweat from fear. After we got home, he had a high fever. My mother-in-law and Elias were afraid that Easton had been infected with the zombie virus and refused to take care of him. They wanted to throw him outside and let him fend for himself, with my insistence. They locked us in the master bedroom and made me take care of my son alone. I gave him medicine and wiped his whole body with a wet towel. After taking care of him for 2 days and 2 nights, my son's fever subsided, but I was infected. I was delirious from the fever and weak all over. I asked my son to bring me some antipyretics. My son looked at the remaining 3 bottles of ibuprofen and left the room with the medicine. Elias asked if I had taken the medicine. My son asked indifferently, "What if we get sick in the future?" Elias was silent. My mother-in-law agreed. Easton really has long-term vision. Your mom is an adult and has a strong resistance. The whole family happily went to eat and stopped caring about me. They didn't even help me with physical cooling, until I had several febrile convulsions and my brain was damaged, turning me into a person with intellectual disabilities. When they saw that I was useless, in order to save food, they didn't give me anything to eat and starved me until I was on the verge of death. Before I died, they found that there was no more food. My mother-in-law suggested, "She's going to die anyway. It's better to exchange her body for food." Elias couldn't quite accept it. He still had some sense of shame and didn't want to be cuckolded. My mother-in-law encouraged him again. "What are you hesitating for because of a fool? After the end of the world is over, Mom will find you a young and beautiful girl to marry." Elias happily agreed. My son wanted to refuse. But when his grandmother asked him whether he wanted to eat or keep his foolish mother, he silently went back to his room. Since then, male neighbors kept coming in and out of my room. At first, they left a pack of instant noodles, and later, it was even just a piece of biscuit. It wasn't until the vaccine was successfully developed, the power was restored, and the end of the world was coming to an end that they turned me into food to completely cover up their crimes, after being reborn. I also remembered the things that happened during the time when I had intellectual disabilities. whether it was Elias's family or those male neighbors. They all deserved to die. 18. 5 tattered cars, stained with blood, crashed through the gate of the fire passage and drove into the community. Dozens of zombies followed behind the cars. The 5 cars drove around in circles, knocking down and running over the zombies. Elias and his son got out of the cars under the protection of the neighbors. He looked around at the surroundings, wearing a proud smile on his face, and stamped his feet hard, saying, "Neighbors, what do you think of this place?" The neighbors all flattered him. The original residents of the community secretly lifted the curtains to check on the intruders. Elias didn't care about the original residents of the community. He waved his hand arrogantly and said loudly, "Come on, I'll take you to eat." The crowd had been so hungry that their eyes were red. They followed him in a mighty procession. Elias stood at the door of room 401, under the expectant gazes of the neighbors. Elias knocked hard on the door. "Open the door." The door didn't open. My son shouted, "Mom, it's me, open the door quickly." There was still no response from inside the room. The neighbors looked at Elias, their eyes shining with a dangerous light. Half of the people had died on the way here for this meal. If Elias dared to deceive them, they would make him know what it meant to be worse than dead. Elias banged on the door, but it still didn't open. A neighbor grabbed Elias by the collar and asked sharply, "Are you lying to us and making us protect you here?" His wife had been bitten by a zombie on the way here, and he couldn't accept being deceived. Elias was filled with fear. He picked up the walkie-talkie and called, "Wife, my son and I are here. Open the door quickly." I smiled and turned off the walkie-talkie and observed through the surveillance camera. After countless calls brought despair, the neighbor punched Elias down. Just as the other neighbors were about to rush forward, Elias shouted, "Wait a minute, maybe something happened to my wife. Let's break the door down." The neighbor threatened viciously, "If there's no food inside, you're dead meat." The neighbors pushed Elias and his son aside and started to break down the door. 19. After breaking down the door, there was a copper hot pot and a speaker on the dining table. There were charcoal, a lighter, a large bucket of mineral water, and spicy hot pot base on the ground. People rushed into the room and searched everywhere. They didn't find any trace of me, but in the kitchen, they found a freezer that was still working. There were 10 bags of sliced mutton neatly arranged in the freezer. "There's food." The neighbors excitedly set up the pot, boiled water, put in the hot pot base, and started to cook the hot pot. Your wife prepared it quite well. She even left a speaker to play music. They didn't know that if it weren't for the speaker, through which I could remotely play the roars of the zombies, the things here would have been gone long ago. Elias stepped forward arrogantly, trying to push aside the neighbor in front of him and be the first to eat. The neighbor pushed him away forcefully and said with dissatisfaction, "What are you pushing for? Get out of the way." Elias said unhappily, "How dare you push me? This is my stuff." The neighbor sneered, "This is the reward we deserve for protecting you here. If you want to eat, go find your wife." The neighbors formed a circle. Before the slices of meat were cooked, they picked them up and ate them. My son couldn't squeeze in, so he could only stretch his arm in. As soon as he picked up a piece of meat, he quickly stuffed it into his mouth, not caring at all that it was scalding hot. Elias put aside his pride as the temporary leader and joined the group scrambling for the meat. The smell of the spicy hot pot wafted out through the windows and the door. Declan in the community smelled the aroma and came out of his house. In the previous life, Declan from Lishue community was very well known. He graduated from a martial arts school, relying on his good fighting skills. He gathered a group of subordinates and went around robbing, killing, and committing all kinds of evil. Declan led more than 20 subordinates, brandishing machetes and heading straight for room 401. Elias and the others were enjoying their meal happily, but 10 bags of sliced mutton were simply not enough. Just as everyone was calculating how they could eat more, Declan and his men stood at the door. Declan pointed his knife at the neighbors and said, "Stop eating and get out of here." The slices of meat were the lifeblood of the neighbors. Asking them to give up eating the meat was no different from taking their lives. The neighbors had gone through the baptism of the journey and had become bolder. They dared to kill zombies, let alone people. Get lost, Declan was cursed at, and he swung his knife and killed the person who had cursed him. The other neighbors picked up their weapons and rushed forward, engaging in a fierce battle. In the heat of the fight, the boiling hot pot was even overturned. Soon, the neighbors and my son all fell in a pool of blood. Declan's subordinates dragged Elias, who was hiding in the toilet, out. Declan, with burns all over his face, looked sinister and swung his knife to chop. Elias's pants were wet, and he shouted, "Don't kill me. My wife has hidden a large amount of food. My wife is good-looking. She's a doctor and can treat your injuries." The machete stopped above his head. Extensive burns were difficult to treat even in normal times, not to mention in the apocalypse when there was a shortage of medical supplies and doctors. Declan asked coldly, "Where is your wife? Her walkie-talkie might be out of power, and I can't get in touch with her for now. When I manage to contact her, I'll take you there, boss." Elias was like a sycophant, only lacking a wagging tail. "If you dare to deceive me, I'll chop you into pieces and feed you to the zombies." 20. Room 401 had solar power supply, so Declan and the others chose to stay. Elias kept contacting me without a moment's rest. "Wife, answer me quickly if you hear me." I felt that the time was about right and lazily replied, "I'm here, wife, I've arrived at the place. But I didn't see you. Where are you?" I sneered and asked. "Tell you the location so that you can bring people to rob me." Elias lied blatantly. "My son and I got rid of the others. It's just the two of us." "Elias, the way you're groveling for your life makes me sick. Your son is already dead. Why don't you go down and accompany him?" Declan and Elias searched around and found a hidden surveillance camera. Declan snatched the walkie-talkie and threatened, "Tell me your address right away, or I'll chop him up." I said indifferently, "Okay." Declan cut off one of Elias's fingers. "Will you tell me or not?" "Go on." Declan wielded the knife again. After several consecutive times, Elias was crying bitterly. Declan also realized that he couldn't threaten me and was about to kill Elias to vent his anger. Elias pleaded, "Boss, let me go. I can make hot pot for you guys." Declan slapped him in the face. "You've eaten all the meat. Where is there any meat left?" Elias looked at the ground. Declan understood, but he didn't want to dirty his hands. He led his subordinates into the room to play with their phones and left the scene to Elias. Elias prepared everything. Declan and his subordinates started eating, and Elias served them by the side, not even having the right to eat. Soon, Declan's stomach ached terribly. He pointed at Elias and cursed, "You son of a bitch, how dare you poison us? I'll chop you to death." Elias grabbed the walkie-talkie and turned to run. Declan and the others were all poisoned and fell to the ground. Too weak to chase after him. 21. I thought Elias would die outside, but unexpectedly, a day later, I heard his voice calling again. He pleaded, apologized, and played the victim. He kept trying to win my sympathy. 3 days later, Elias said feebly, "Wife, I'm going to die. I want to see you one last time." I agreed and told him the real address. When Elias appeared at the door, he was covered in blood and looked extremely. I saw that he didn't have any weapons and carefully opened the door. As soon as Elias entered the room, he grabbed my neck and said sinisterly, "You bitch, go to hell." I jabbed the stun gun under his ribcage. In an instant, he was electrocuted and trembled all over. When he fell, he pulled me down with him. He thought that we were both electrocuted at the same time, and as a man, he would recover faster and be able to get up before me. The patients were like the zombies in the movies. And I was worried that it would turn into another situation similar to the mask incident. Jojo suddenly rushed up and started biting him. Elias cursed, "You damned dog, get out of the way." Scram. Amidst his curses, I easily stood up. "Jojo, come back." Jojo stood beside me, looking at Elias menacingly. Before he could beg for mercy, I jabbed the stun gun at him again and cursed, "I'm wearing insulated shoes, you fool." Elias pleaded, "Wife, I was wrong, let me stay, I'll treat you well. Don't worry, all these things will be yours." I'll take Jojo and leave. I picked up the rope on the ground and held it in my hand. Elias had a bad feeling, following the rope with his eyes. He saw that the other end was tied to the doorknob of the balcony. "You managed to deal with Declan, you can handle Donovan, who is as notorious as him too. Come on." I gave a hard tug, and the balcony door opened. Donovan and another zombie smelled the smell of blood on Elias and pounced on him. "Goodbye, no. I mean, never see you again." I ran out of the room with Jojo and closed the door. Elias's curses and screams came from inside the room. At this moment, the lights in the corridor turned on, and the power was restored. This meant that the vaccine had been successfully developed, and the army had started to reclaim the city. 22. The end of the world had ended. the sun shone on the earth. Dispelling the haze of the past few months, humans were tenacious and resilient. They quickly restored order and resumed work and production. I became a doctor again. I decided not to remarry, focused on saving people, and was independent and beautiful.